Hi everybody, and now we're in the moving around module. Should be on your moving around tab, and what we're going to do in this module is we're going to see different ways to move around and select cells in Excel. You should have some basics down, but we're going to learn a lot of different ways to do that in this module. We're also going to learn a lot of keyboard shortcuts. Now, don't feel like you have to take notes of all of them. That's going to be in a document out in the training materials. But what I want you guys to do is just kind of get an ideas and a feel for some of these keyboard shortcuts, and hopefully you'll find 3 or 4 that really will help you be more efficient in Excel and moving around. I'll definitely point out my favorites as well. Okay, so let's start off. We'll just go down here, and most of us already know that when we're in Excel, we can use our mouse to click on different cells, and that's one way to move around. If we want to highlight cells with our mouse, you can just hold the left mouse button down, and we'll highlight a range of cells that we can work with. Can highlight that whole region right there. Well, now the first thing I want to show you, the first keyboard shortcut, is the Control plus arrows. If you look here in this first section, we've got a kind of a table of apples and a table of oranges. So if you hold your Control key down and use the arrow keys, if we go right, Excel will go to that first cell in that first group of data. And then if I keep holding my Control down and go right again, it'll go to the last cell in that table. And then it'll go again to the first cell in the next table, then the last. And when we get to the end where there's no more data, if I hit the Control and right arrow, it goes to the end of the workbook. And likewise, I can use Control left arrow to go back. So I can go there, I can go to the first oranges, the last apples, first apples, and all the way back to the beginning. The Control and up and down arrow keys work the same way. You can just use those to jump up to the next piece of data or the last piece of data in that table, and all the way to the end of the workbook. Okay, so now let's go down and let's talk about the go to command. Now we already learned how to use the name box to go to a certain cell. There's also a go to command. If I hit the F5 key, pulls up a go to dialog box. And here I can just type in a reference just like the name box. I can type in A1 and hit OK, and it'll go to A1. And then I can hit F5 and go back to A25 if I want. Hit the F5 again. And you see how GoTo will kind of keep the last couple things you went to, so you could just click on those right away too. Click OK. Now let's look at a couple other options in that box. Hit F5, and we're going to go to the special button. And now you see you can go to notes or constants or formulas or blanks or the current region. We'll talk about that. The current array, objects. Most of these I'm going to let you guys experiment with and see what you want to work with. But one of the ones I use most often in the special is go to last cell. If I click that and click OK, that will take me to the very last cell that has information on this worksheet. So now I can see my last cell in this worksheet is R1071. Okay, if I want to go back, I can hit F5 again and go back to A1 and click OK. It'll bring me back up there. Well, now let's go down and look at the end key and the home key. So these are also quick ways to go to certain sections. So if I'm on my keyboard anywhere and I hold the Control key down and hit end, that will also take me to the last cell of my worksheet. And if I do Control and home, that will take me back to the beginning of the worksheet where A1 is visible. So those are some kind of useful commands too to get around. All right, moving right along, let's use the arrow keys and go down here. Let's talk about cut, copy, and paste. We've used those a little bit, but now let's get a little bit more descriptive in what they are. Okay, so for this section, for cut, copy, and paste, we're going to use the keyboard shortcuts. And the keyboard shortcuts for those three are Control X for cut, Control C for copy, Control V for paste. Now they can make a little bit of sense. You could say Control X is like a cut, it's like an X. C is for copy, and V is like inserting something. But I kind of look at the keyboard, they're right next to each other. So Control X is cut, and then copy and paste are right next to each other. And this is really useful because those are the three, you'll use those keyboard shortcuts together all the time. Okay, so let's see what the differences are here. So first off, I'm going to take my list 1 and I'm going to highlight it with my mouse, apples to bananas. I'm going to hold Control X, and that puts a little, it's called a marquee, where it's kind of flashing around the edge of that range. And then I'm going to go click over here and I'm going to paste it, Control V. And you see how it cut it out of the worksheet and pasted it somewhere else. Okay, now to get that back, I'm just going to do Control Z, which is undo, and we'll go to the next one, List 2, and this time we're going to copy it. And I'm going to hit Control C to copy that, and then I'm going to move over and do Control V, and that'll paste it. But you see, copy leaves it in the original location. Okay, subtle differences, but good to know. Oftentimes you're going to cut in the same worksheet, move things from one place to another, and you might copy if you want to move it to another worksheet. Okay, let's do Control Z. Okay, now we're going to look at another way. It's kind of like cut and paste, but it's actually a move. So I'm going to come down here now, and I am going to highlight these two cells using my keyboard, and I'll use a shift and an arrow key. That will let you select multiple cells using the keyboard, using the shift key. Okay, so I'll get these, and now I could do the cut and paste, but now that I have a range selected, I'm going to go here and look at my cursor. When it goes over the edge of that range, it turns into an arrow with 4 arrows around it. That's my move icon. Now I can just click on the edge of that range and drag and move that range wherever I want it to. Okay, it's just like cut and paste, except for it's moving it. And this is good for smaller groups of cells that you want to just move over. A lot of times you'll use cut if you have to select a large range of cells, and it's not as easy to grab them with the handle and move them over. Now if I want to move them back, again, I can just highlight those with my mouse, go to the edge, and move it over there. So now let's scroll down and look at some of the other cell icons here. So I'm going to click on a cell, and let's look at the icons. So we already talked about at the edge here, I've got my move icon. That'll let me move something. Okay, now let's see something else that's interesting. Let's hold the Control key down while we're on the edge of that cell. See how that cursor changed from just the 4 icons to having a plus there? When I use my Control key on the edge of the cell, now I can use my mouse, click and drag, and it does a copy of that cell. And I could do that again. So that's kind of neat too. You can just move the cell, or if you want to make a copy, you can actually copy those. Does that work on multiple cells? Absolutely it does. I can select several cells, hold Control, and then I move over and it makes a copy of those. And hit Control Z. Okay, now let's talk about the other cell icon that we see. From the edge we get the move icon and the copy. But if we go over in the lower right, you'll see a little square arrow. It's the autofill handle. Okay, now what that does is it basically copies everything without doing all that. So if I'm on that autofill handle and I click and drag it down, it's going to copy bananas as far down as I drag it. And if I want to move all those cells over, I still have my autofill handle. I can click on that and move it over, and it copies bananas all the way over. So that's a really useful tool, and we're going to see a lot of different ways to use autofill as the course progresses. For now, let me just back those up. And now let's come down and talk about working with larger ranges. Earlier we just saw how we could use our keyboard shortcut to select that whole table, or we could use our mouse. But sometimes when the table's really big, we want to select the whole thing at once. For that, we're going to use Control A, and we're going to select what's called the current region. I'll explain to you what that is. So anywhere in this table, if I hit Control A, it's going to select this entire thing that's called the current region. Now what Excel sees as the current region is any group of information surrounded by blank rows and blank columns. So it went all the way around here. Because I could see that I might not have wanted to select student and Bob and GPA, but because they're connected, it got selected when I did select current region. So let's try something. Let's take that GPA and just hit the delete key and get rid of it. And now let's do Control A. And you see how it just selected the table because now there's a blank row right there. So I just wanted to go over that. That's how you understand what it's going to select when you do current region. So let's see where that's really useful. If I come down here a little bit more, I have a huge table. It starts on row 79 and goes all the way down to row 1071. So if I wanted to select that whole table, I'd have to click on my mouse and I have to drag and it would keep scrolling and go all the way down. And I'd wait and wait and wait till it got to the bottom, and then I have to go over and keep going down. And oops, I went too far. Now I've screwed it up. I got to start all over again. Okay, so now I can go back to the top. Well, here's where Control A is really, really super useful, because now I can just click on one of the cells in that table, hit Control A, and now if I want to move that table somewhere, I can just click on the edge and move that table. If I want to copy it and paste it somewhere else, I can do Control C, copy that whole table, and move it over here, and I can hit paste. Okay, so Control A, selecting that current region, is really useful. Let me just back up a little bit to put everything back where it was. So that's about it for moving around. We saw a lot of different ways to move around and select cells in this module, and I hope that you pick a few keyboard shortcuts that you really like and will help you move around and be more efficient.